Buckingham Palace has said King Charles spent a short period of time in hospital today after experiencing the temporary side effects of his cancer treatment. The world has been holding its breath over King Charles's health as concerns grow inside and outside the palace walls. Recently, Prince William stepped forward with a revelation that many feared but hoped would never come. His words carried both sadness and strength. Metaphorical rug can be pulled from under your feet quite quick at any point. You maybe think to yourself, it won't happen to us. But when it does happen to you, yeah. Then it takes you into some pretty not great places, leaving millions searching for answers. What exactly did William reveal about his father's condition? And what does it mean for the monarchy's future? The solutions are out there. There is real solutions to these problems. Join us as we uncover the heartbreaking truth behind Prince William's confirmation about King Charles's health. A life of duty and unforeseen challenges. From the very beginning, King Charles Roman III's life was never ordinary. Born on November 14, 1948, as the first child of Queen Elizabeth Roman II and Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, he grew up in the heart of British royalty. His earliest years were spent within the walls of Buckingham Palace and the grounds of Windsor, surrounded by ceremony, expectation, and history. Even then, those who met him described a boy curious and sensitive, one who observed before speaking, and often preferred silence to the bustle of palace life. He was the elder brother to Princess Anne, followed later by Princes Andrew and Edward. The bond with his sister Anne in particular would remain one of the closest in his life. His education mirrored the balance between tradition and modernity that defined much of his later reign. Charles attended Chim and then Gordonstoun in Scotland, the same tough boarding school his father had gone to. Life there was not easy. He often spoke about the harsh climate and demanding discipline. Yet it was at Gordonstoun that he learned endurance and independence. He later attended Trinity College, Cambridge, where he studied anthropology, archaeology, and history. These are subjects that matched his lifelong curiosity about the human story and our relationship with nature. By the late 1960s, he also trained as a pilot and later served in both the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force, following a royal tradition of military service. Those who knew him then often said he was dutiful and committed, though never showy. As a young man, Charles developed a deep interest in architecture, conservation, and the environment. In the 1970s and 80s, he spoke publicly about sustainability, climate change, and organic farming long before they became mainstream discussions. He founded charities such as the Prince's Trust, dedicated to helping disadvantaged youth, and supported numerous organizations that promoted responsible urban development. His speeches were sometimes mocked for being too passionate or too unconventional, but in time, the world began to see that he had been ahead of his era. By all accounts, Charles was active and healthy through his early decades of public service. Known for his love of walking, gardening, and outdoor activities at his beloved Highgrove estate, he maintained a disciplined lifestyle. There were occasional minor health concerns, such as a hernia operation in 2003 and a few sports-related injuries, but nothing that raised major public alarm. Those who worked with him often remarked on his energy during official tours, how he would shake hands, deliver speeches, and still find time to meet local farmers, artists, and business owners late into the day. When Queen Elizabeth Roman II passed away in September 2022, Charles immediately ascended the throne, becoming King Charles Roman III. His accession marked the end of the longest apprenticeship in British royal history. Many saw him as a bridge between eras. The respectful son, who upheld his mother's legacy, and the reform-minded monarch who wanted to modernize the crown's connection with the public. The transition to kingship was calm but heavy with emotion. The new king promised continuity and duty, yet there was also a sense of determination in his tone. He was a man stepping fully into the role he had been preparing for his entire life. Before the health challenges that would later make headlines, King Charles had shown no signs of serious illness. In interviews and appearances, he looked strong for his age, still keeping up with engagements across the Commonwealth. Polly's aides noted his discipline, his preference for early mornings, and his habit of working late into the night reviewing documents or planning events. In those early years of his reign, there was confidence among both the public and the palace that the king was ready for a long and steady rule. But as time would show, life at the very top of Britain's oldest institution would soon take a turn no one saw coming. It was meant to be a routine medical procedure, one that would barely make the headlines. In January 2024, the palace announced that King Charles would be treated for an enlarged prostate. A common and relatively minor condition for men his age, the tone was calm, almost reassuring. Officials even emphasized that the king's condition was benign, adding a touch of levity by saying he was in good spirits. For a moment, the public relaxed, but behind the scenes, something unexpected happened. During that same procedure, doctors discovered what the palace carefully described as a separate issue of concern. Those words would soon take on a far heavier meaning. It wasn't long before speculation began. The language felt vague, even guarded, and royal watchers quickly sensed that this was no ordinary update. Then came February 5th, 2024. The date is now etched in the memory of royal followers. On that morning, Buckingham Palace released a short but unsettling statement. It read that His Majesty the King had been diagnosed with a form of cancer and would begin a schedule of regular treatments. Crucially, the palace clarified that it was not prostate cancer, but did not specify the type. For many, the lack of detail only deepened the shock. The news broke across the world within minutes, and television networks switched to special coverage. The gravity of those few words, a form of cancer, was enough to silence the usual chatter about royal gossip. This tension would continue for months, and it was in this atmosphere of uncertainty, patience, and hope that Prince William would later step forward, confirming what many had feared all along. Strength despite uncertainty. It began as a perfectly ordinary morning in London, the kind the city is famous for. A cool mist hung in the air. The sky wore its usual shade of silver gray, and the hum of routine life surrounded Buckingham Palace. The royal guards stood firm in their scarlet coats, their faces still as stone. The palace clock struck its familiar chime, echoing across the courtyard with crisp precision. Inside, courtiers glided through the marble halls, their calm footsteps blending into the quiet rhythm of duty. It was, by all appearances, just another royal morning, but at exactly 9:47 a.m., everything changed. It began as a murmur, a faint whisper that slipped through the palace corridors like a draft. At first, no one wanted to believe it. A butler paused mid-step, a maid dropped her tray, and an aide stared blankly at the floor. The stillness that followed was almost unreal. Then the words that no one ever expected were spoken aloud, trembling and sharp. "The king has been taken ill." In an instant, the palace that had always seemed unshakable became a hive of chaos. Guards who normally moved with ceremonial grace began running. The golden gates, symbols of elegance and tradition, clanged shut with urgency. Motorcades appeared out of nowhere. Black cars speeding through the courtyard as doors slammed, and voices rose in confusion. The air buzzed with tension. Telephones rang non-stop. Messages were whispered from one trembling hand to another. The calm had been replaced by something far darker. The unmistakable pulse of fear. Behind those centuries-old stone walls, a storm had begun to gather. By midday, the world received its first glimpse of that storm. The official royal statement arrived. Brief, cold, and cryptic. His Majesty is under medical supervision following complications from treatment. That was all. No photographs of reassurance, no smiling doctors, no royal wave from a hospital balcony, just a single line and then silence. But that silence was deafening across Britain. It echoed through living rooms, offices, and crowded streets. News anchors stumbled over their words. Reporters camped outside the palace gates, and millions of people whispered the same haunting question. What's happening to the king? Inside the palace, the atmosphere grew heavier with every hour. The staff moved like ghosts, speaking in hushed tones, afraid that even the walls might be listening. They knew what the public did not, that this was not a routine illness, not a passing faint or a fever. It was serious, terrifyingly serious. The king, the man who had waited his entire life for the throne, now lay battling to remain upon it. The crown that had once symbolized triumph now felt like a burden too heavy to bear. As the day turned to evening, the skies above London seemed to mirror the mood inside the palace, gray, heavy, and waiting for the rain to fall. The great halls, once filled with laughter and ceremony, were now silent, but for the echo of hurried footsteps and the soft hum of prayers whispered by anxious hearts. Outside, the crowd grew larger, pressed against the gates, faces pale with worry and curiosity. Candles began to appear on the pavement, small flickering lights in the growing dusk. And within those palace walls, history was holding its breath. The monarchy had faced wars, scandals, and storms before, but never this. Never such a sudden, intimate fear, because this was not about politics or power. It was about a man, frail and mortal, beneath the weight of his crown. The day that began with calm dignity had ended in trembling uncertainty. The golden age of the king, so long awaited, now hung by a thread. And as midnight approached, one truth became clear to everyone who whispered in the shadows. The fate of the crown rested on the beating heart of one man, and that heart was faltering. How did Prince William summon the courage to confirm the tragic news? How had Charles been coping with the crown before the illness? What were the silent struggles he had behind the scene? Let's find out. The weight of a son's words. When Prince William stepped before the cameras, his voice was steady, but the world could feel the weight pressing behind it. Every word seemed to carry the full burden of the crown, the family and the nation watching from every corner of the globe. "My father's condition is stable," he said softly, "but his illness is incurable. We are cherishing the time we have together." The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. It wasn't just the confirmation of a rumor. It was the acknowledgement of a truth too painful to disguise. Outside Buckingham Palace, grief and disbelief mingled in the air. Thousands gathered, standing shoulder to shoulder in the chill of a gray afternoon, clutching flowers, candles, and phones that streamed the moment again and again. Some prayed quietly. Others simply stared at the palace windows, hoping for movement, a shadow, anything. Reporters lined the mall like sentinels. Cameras fixed on the balcony that had seen so many royal waves, now drawn behind velvet curtains across oceans. Headlines erupted. News anchors' tones shifted from speculation to sorrow. The words incurable and cherishing echoed across time zones, two words that reshaped how the world saw their monarch. For months there had been whispers. King Charles, diagnosed with cancer in early 2024, had continued to fulfill his duties, attending meetings, greeting ambassadors, and maintaining the public calm that defined his reign. But those close enough to witness him privately saw the difference: the slower movements, the longer pauses, the fatigue that no public smile could conceal. It wasn't the first time the king had faced pain with such quiet dignity. In his younger years, Charles was the image of strength and determination. He rose before dawn, rode for hours through the damp Scottish air, and found peace in the simplicity of soil and saddle. His devotion to polo and the countryside was legendary, not for leisure, but as proof of endurance. To him, health was discipline and resilience was duty. But time, relentless as it is, began to test that discipline. Surgeries and injuries came in waves. The knee operation in 1998, a hernia repair in 2003, the minor procedures that followed in later years. Each time he emerged smiling, shaking hands with nurses, and waving to photographers, determined to show that the body could yield without surrender. Yet those closest to him began to sense a quiet shift, a deeper reflection on fragility, on legacy, on the limits of strength itself. Now, as William faced the cameras, that legacy seemed to stand behind him, proud, weathered, unbroken. The king who had once played through pain now inspired a son who spoke through heartbreak. The monarchy had always been about endurance, about holding one's head high no matter the storm. But this time, even endurance had a cost. And as the palace remained still under the November sky, Britain waited, suspended between gratitude and grief, wondering how much longer the silence would last. But when the silence finally breaks, will it mark the end of her reign or the beginning of her reckoning within the crown? Stay tuned. Courage behind the crown. King Charles has faced one of the most challenging periods of his life over the past few years, as his health has taken a difficult turn, particularly following his cancer diagnosis. What was supposed to be a season of celebration and stability after his long-awaited coronation turned into a time of uncertainty, concern, and resilience for both the king and the royal family. Less than a year after he ascended the throne, news broke that the monarch had been diagnosed with an undisclosed form of cancer. The discovery came unexpectedly while receiving treatment for an enlarged prostate, often also buffer associated with aging. Doctors found signs of something more. Journey serves as an inspiring reminder that strength is not the absence of struggle, but the ability to rise above it with grace. Now that the king has fallen seriously ill, how did the members of the royal family react? Were they defensive? Did they point fingers? Let's dive into the details of the reaction from the royal family. These experiences have reminded the world that beneath the crowns, titles, and royal ceremonies lie real people, vulnerable yet resilient. King Charles's story, marked by illness and perseverance, stands as a testament to the power of determination and faith in the face of adversity. And as he continues to heal and lead, his both beloved figures withdrew from public life to focus on recovery, testing the family's strength and unity. For Prince William, balancing his royal duties while caring for his ailing father and wife became overwhelming. Describing 2024 as the hardest year of my life and a dreadful experience, he revealed a rare glimpse of vulnerability, showing that even royalty cannot escape the deep emotional toll of illness and personal struggle. Meanwhile, the king began what would become a long and ongoing course of treatment. Details of his condition were kept private in line with royal tradition, but it was clear that his health journey was far from easy. For more than a year, King Charles has quietly endured therapy and medical supervision with his schedule significantly reduced. As for the Princess of Wales, she recently shared the hopeful news that she is now in remission, a message that lifted the spirits of millions who had followed her journey with empathy and admiration. Her courage has mirrored the quiet strength of her father-in-law, reminding many that even in moments of royal glamour, there are deeply human stories of pain, endurance, and hope. Together, the revelation came as a shock not only to the king himself, but also to a nation that had just watched him officially take on the weight of the crown after the passing of Queen Elizabeth. Roman II. The diagnosis sent ripples of worry through the United Kingdom and beyond. The public, who had celebrated his coronation with grandeur, suddenly found themselves praying and hoping for his recovery. Yet this was not just a health battle for one man. It soon became a trying time for the entire royal family. In a heartbreaking turn of events, Princess Kate Middleton was diagnosed with cancer around the same time as the king, shaking the royal family to its core. Public appearances became fewer, and each reemergence was met with warmth, applause, and deep respect from the British people, many of whom admired his courage and commitment to continue serving, even while fighting a personal battle. Despite his health challenges, the king has slowly and steadily begun to return to his public duties. His presence at official events has grown more frequent in recent months, a sign that he is regaining strength and stability. Those close to him say he remains determined, disciplined, and deeply reflective, qualities that have defined his character throughout his decades of public service. The unexpected announcements, the unexpected changes began with the new reign. Once the king took the throne, the royal household began a full review of patronages, presidencies, and links with charities. This was not a small step, but a wide remapping of who would stay on as patron, which causes would pass to others, and which ties would end. Nothing on this scale had been attempted in decades. The aim was to make the new reign match today's priorities and the time available from working royals. It also showed early on that many of the roles once held under the late queen would not simply continue out of tradition, but would instead be looked at closely. Although the review took months and was done quietly, many people were shocked when the results were finally made public. Let's take a closer look at what really happened. The first big announcement that drew public attention was that many patronages would be given up. This was explained as a practical step to keep the family's workload realistic, but for the organizations, it came as a surprise. Hundreds of charities had grown used to the status of a royal link and had tied parts of their identity to it. The palace said it was not possible to keep every connection, and so a cut had to be made. The move was presented as a way to direct energy where it mattered most, but it stood out as one of the first clear signs that the new reign would look different. Soon after, the results of the review were made public through lists and press notes. These showed in detail which groups would keep their patron, which would gain a new one, and which would lose the link entirely. Stepping down as Colonel of the Scots Guards was a clear sign of the times. He had served for decades, attending parades and regimental events, but age was catching up. His decision marked how older royals were slowly reducing their duties, allowing the family to rely on a smaller circle of working members. At the same time, the royal family pointed out the major renovation work going on at Buckingham Palace. The works had been running for years, but now they were a central subject. The project was called the most extensive in the palace's history. The cost ran into hundreds of millions, funded by a rise in the sovereign grant. The palace said the work was unavoidable, warning that the building risked serious breakdowns if nothing was done. Because of the works, Buckingham Palace could not be used as before. Another announcement confirmed that state visits and large receptions would be moved elsewhere. Now as queen, her list was widened to reflect trust in her role and permanence within the system. The way it was shown to the public stressed that she was not just filling empty spots, but adding to work she had already done. Some charities that kept or gained her support made sure to thank her. Shelter Box, a disaster relief group, confirmed she would remain their patron. The Queen's Nursing Institute also voiced its gratitude, pointing to the importance of her link. These statements showed that the review was not only about losses, but also about gains. At the same time, another announcement showed how the royal family was managing change across generations. The Duke of Kent, cousin of the late Queen and one of the longest-serving royals, started handing over his military roles. Further changes continued among senior royals. The Duke of Kent's step back was part of a larger pattern of older royals doing less. Reports spoke of retirements and handovers. All of these decisions were meant to improve the system. But here's the twist. They've deeply affected several royals and continue to shake things up behind palace walls. One of the most surprising impacts, Queen Camilla herself, who has reportedly been pushed to the edge by recent developments. Stay with us because what we're about to uncover about Camilla might just leave you speechless. For charities that had waited in uncertainty, this was a turning point. Those kept on felt relief, those cut felt disappointment. Some had held a royal name for over a century. So losing it was a major change. A key part of the outcome was a bigger role for Queen Camilla. She was confirmed as patron of about 15 new organizations. These included groups for nursing, literacy, and volunteer work, areas she had long supported. For Camilla, this was both steady progress and an expansion. As Duchess of Cornwall, she had built a profile around reading and support for victims of domestic abuse. Windsor Castle and St. James's Palace were chosen as alternatives. This was practical, but marked a break with tradition. For many decades, foreign leaders had been welcomed in the same grand rooms, and their closure changed the feel of these events. The palace said the move was only for the duration of the works, but since the project would take years, the change was set to shape much of the reign. With such vast sums at stake, the cost of the works quickly became a public issue. There was debate on whether taxpayers should pay for the palace's modernization. Those who support the idea said it was essential upkeep for a national landmark and would prevent costly repairs later. The palace defended its choice by pointing to technical needs, while the trustees of the sovereign grant spoke of oversight. Official financial reports gave more detail. The household's accounts showed rising costs in areas like energy and staff pay. These reports were used to explain why cuts were needed. They also tied into the palace's wider message of modernization and tighter control of spending. The full size of the review became clear when reports said nearly 200 organizations were affected. This wasn't just a small change. It was a major reshuffle. Meanwhile, what do you think the King's health journey says about the changing face of the monarchy? Has it brought the royal family closer to the public or simply reminded us of their humanity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy